Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at a case that has, well, it's spanned more than 2 decades, it's haunted the headlines, and it has completely reshaped several lives. It's a story of a tragic, a highly suspicious death that to this day remains unsolved. It's really defined by mystery, by conflicting evidence, and by a father's relentless, decades-long quest for the truth.
A truly heartbreaking quest.
It is. We are diving into the facts surrounding the death of Stuart Lubbock.
That's right. And I think it's important to state up front, our mission here is to take the sources we have, the timelines, the details of the police investigations, the legal battles, and really just synthesize them impartially for you.
Right.
This is an incredibly sensitive and difficult topic, and we have to acknowledge that sensitivity as we go through it. We're focusing not just on the loss of Stuart Lubbock's life, but on the repeated failure to achieve any kind of legal clarity.
And that failure had a profound impact.
A profound and lasting impact on his family. So we really need to keep that in mind as we navigate the incredibly complex path of this case.
Absolutely. So before we delve into the tragic events of that night in 2001, let's just ground ourselves in who Stuart Lubbock was. The sources tell us he was born on October 1st, 1969.
So he was 31 years old.
31 years old at the time of his death. He worked as a wholesale butcher's supervisor, and crucially, Stuart was a father, a devoted father. He had 2 young daughters.
Very young. I believe they were 4 and just 1 year old.
That's right, 4 and 1. They were being raised by his former partner after their separation. So the foundation of this entire story is, well, it's the life of a young father that was cut short under the most baffling and suspicious circumstances imaginable.
Exactly.
The story of Stuart Lubbock's final hours, it begins on the night of March 30, 2001. The sources we have, they paint a picture of him as a pleasant, sociable man.
Lives with his father, Terry, and his brother in Harlow, Essex.
Right. And his timeline that night takes him to the Millennium nightclub. It was there that he met the television personality Michael Barrymore,
Who was, at the time, a huge star.
a household name. After meeting, Stuart accepted an invitation to an after-party, a small, private gathering at Barrymore's home in Roydon, Essex. And this was, tragically, the last place Stuart was seen alive and well by multiple witnesses.
And that transition from, a late-night party to a crime scene happened very, very quickly. In the early hours of March 31st,
Just before 6 a.m.,
just before 5:46 a.m., the emergency services were called to the address. Stuart Lubbock had been found unconscious in the swimming pool.
so they rushed him to Princess Alexandra Hospital in Harlow, but
The effort was unsuccessful. He was pronounced dead shortly after arriving. And, initially you might think, a tragic accident, alcohol, a swimming pool. It's a terrible but plausible scenario.
the postmortem changed all of that.
It changed everything. The findings from that examination immediately escalated this from a tragedy into a major police investigation.
And that initial medical evidence is so crucial here because it completely shifted the perception of what happened. It moved it right out of the realm of accidental drowning.
Instantly.
The sources highlight 2 key findings that put enormous suspicion on everyone who was there that morning. The first was the toxicology report.
Right. They found traces of ecstasy, cocaine, and a significant amount of alcohol in his blood.
So he was highly intoxicated.
Very. He'd ingested multiple substances. But it was the second finding that was far more critical.
He was discovered to have suffered serious anal injuries.
And the sheer trauma implied by those 2 things together, the severe internal injuries alongside the drugs and alcohol, followed by death in a pool, it meant investigators just could not treat this as a simple drowning.
No.
The possibility of foul play, specifically some kind of indecent assault leading to his death, had to be confronted immediately. The injuries were so serious that the whole investigative assumption had to shift.
From accident to homicide?
To homicide or manslaughter, yes. Even if the final technical cause of death was drowning. The question for the forensic team became not just how he drowned, but why a fit 31-year-old man was in that state and had sustained those kinds of injuries in the first place.
And we have to talk about the immediate and frankly devastating public fallout from this, which centered almost entirely on the host of the party, Michael Barrymore.
At that time, one of the biggest stars in the UK.
One of the highest paid, most recognized presenters, and the sources are clear. As a direct result of the police investigation, the media scrutiny, his career was effectively destroyed.
Almost overnight.
It became this huge national scandal, not just a localized tragedy.
And that's a really important detail. The sudden collapse of such a high-profile career, It underscores the immense pressure on the police to find answers.
Of course.
The location being the home of a celebrity meant every single detail was amplified, scrutinized, often sensationalized. So the police were trying to manage this incredibly complex, sensitive investigation.
While also dealing with a media circus.
A global media circus. And that dual pressure, you can see later on how it almost certainly affected the integrity of the crime scene and the initial gathering of evidence.
When you just look at the raw facts, the drugs, the alcohol, the severe injuries, and the drowning, it's a picture that is almost impossible to reconcile with a simple accident.
It is.
And the fact that there were 9 people at that party in total, and none of them could provide a coherent story about what happened, that's what defines this entire case.
A wall of silence.
So the first major public attempt to figure out what happened was the inquest in September 2002.
Right. And an inquest is designed to establish the facts, not necessarily to assign criminal blame.
And the result was deeply unsatisfying. The coroner, Caroline Beasley Murray, she delivered an open verdict.
Which is far from a conclusion. And she was very clear about why she had to do that. She delivered this really powerful, damning statement about the witnesses.
Can you share that?
She said, and I'm quoting directly here, "None of these witnesses who were party guests for 3 hours have given to this court an explanation about how Stuart Lubbock, a previously fit 31-year-old, should be found floating in a swimming pool at the premises with a significant level of alcohol and drugs in his system and have serious anal injuries."
Wow, she lays it all out right there.
She does. That quote perfectly encapsulates the absolute failure of the initial investigation, a total lack of credible, consistent testimony from the people who were actually there.
And for our listeners, what does an open verdict really mean legally?
It essentially means the evidence just doesn't clearly support any single conclusion. It wasn't ruled a murder or a suicide or an accident. It's a formal acknowledgement that the court found the death impossible to explain based on the information it had.
But it doesn't close the door on a criminal case.
Crucially, no. In English law, it doesn't preclude a later murder charge. It leaves the door legally wide open.
And on top of that lack of testimony, you had outright conflict in the key medical evidence.
The pathology, yes. This was another huge problem. The initial pathologist on the scene, Dr. Michael Heath, he concluded in his report that Stuart Lubbock had drowned accidentally.
Which, if that had stood, would have really minimized the criminal aspect of the case.
Absolutely. But his conclusion was almost immediately contested by subsequent examinations. The sources show 3 other pathologists later looked at the body, and they offered very different observations.
What did they see?
Specifically, they noted marks on Lubbock's forehead. Marks that suggested he might have been asphyxiated, held under the water.
So murdered.
Potentially. Now, we have to be careful with the nuance here. None of them said this is the confirmed cause of death. They pointed out the marks could also have been caused by extensive resuscitation attempts.
I see.
But the disagreement itself, one expert saying accident, 3 others suggesting a possible sign of foul play, that introduced profound doubt into the forensic evidence.
When the experts can't agree, where does that leave the legal system?
In a vacuum of truth, it seriously compromises the ability to move forward with any certainty.
And this conflict had serious repercussions for Dr. Heath's career, didn't it? This wasn't just a one-off disagreement.
It wasn't. The sources show that by January 2006, he took the significant step of volunteering to stop working for the police. This came after public criticism for him, drawing conclusions that contradicted other pathologists in multiple high-profile cases.
Not just the Lubbock case.
Not just this one. And the scrutiny just escalated from there. By June 2006, he was called before a disciplinary tribunal where his testimony was officially discredited.
Discredited, that's a strong word.
It's a rare and severe sanction. The Home Office itself weighed in, stating that Dr. Heath had, and I quote, fallen short of the high standards required.
So the scientific bedrock of the case
Was officially deemed unreliable years later. And you have to think about the impact of that. It fundamentally undermines everything that was concluded in the immediate aftermath of the death. It gave Stuart's family powerful justification to demand a completely fresh look at the case.
So you have no reliable testimony, an open verdict, and now a discredited lead pathologist. It's a perfect storm of uncertainty.
It is. The police were left with the physical evidence, the injuries, the drugs, but they lacked the conclusive proof of how he died or the reliable testimony to explain who caused the injuries. And that vacuum is what fueled the entire next stage of this story.
And if there is one person who defines that next stage, it's Stuart's father, Terry Lubbock.
Absolutely.
The sources show he waged this persistent, highly public, and deeply personal campaign. It was driven by grief, but also this relentless dedication. He knew that without constant pressure, the case would just be forgotten.
So he set up the Lubbock Trust.
He did,
Yeah.
specifically to raise funds, to campaign for more investigation, and just to generate as much publicity as he possibly could to keep Stewart's name in the headlines.
And his efforts, they were undeniably the catalyst for what happened next. Starting in 2006, the case came roaring back into the headlines.
One of the most dramatic moves was this attempt at a private prosecution in January of 2006.
That's right. The family solicitor applied to the court for Michael Barrymore to be charged with 6 offenses related to his actions on the morning of Stuart's death. This was the family trying to bypass the state prosecutor, who they felt wasn't acting.
And this got massive public attention because of how they did it.
The sheer spectacle. The solicitor's firm actually tried to serve the legal papers on Barrymore while he was a contestant on Celebrity Big Brother,
On live television.
or at least during the broadcast of the show. It created this huge media moment, putting the family's fight right in the glare of the reality TV spotlight.
But what was the legal outcome of that?
Well, despite the publicity, the case itself was later dismissed by a district judge. The judge ruled that Barrymore had no case to answer.
So it didn't work.
Legally, no. For a private prosecution to succeed, the standard of evidence is still very high. The judge decided the family just hadn't presented enough direct, compelling evidence to meet that bar. It was a publicity victory, but a legal setback.
And the chaos around the witness testimony continued as well.
It did. In May of that year, an inquest witness named Kylie Merritt was arrested on suspicion of perjury.
She was the one who said she saw Barrymore rubbing cocaine on Lubbock's gums.
Exactly. But her testimony was, well, it was highly questionable. After she took a lie detector test for a tabloid newspaper, she publicly stated she couldn't actually be certain that her earlier story was true.
This is a nightmare for investigators.
It's a complete nightmare. Shifting testimony, retractions, it makes it almost impossible to build a reliable case. The perjury charges against her were eventually dropped, but it just highlights the instability of the witness accounts.
And yet, despite these setbacks, Terry's continuous pressure campaign, it finally paid off.
It did. On December 2, 2006, police officially announced they were reopening the investigation into Stuart Lubbock's death, a huge goal achieved.
And that reopening led directly to one of the most critical parts of this whole saga, an investigation into the police themselves.
A major one. Terry Lubbock's lawyer compiled this detailed dossier and presented it to the Independent Police Complaints Commission, the IPCC.
And what was in it?
It contained over 30 separate allegations of incompetence and possible corruption by Essex police in their initial investigation.
An 8 million investigation.
An 8 million investigation, yes. And the IPCC took these allegations extremely seriously.
How so?
They initially approved an investigation to be run by an outside police force for independence. But by April 2007, they escalated it, deciding to manage the investigation themselves.
So they took it in-house.
Exactly. And by May, they confirmed they were investigating a total of 38 separate complaints.
38.
38. Allegations of failing to secure the scene, losing key evidence, failing to take witness statements promptly. Just a systemic breakdown. It showed a huge level of concern about the competence of the original operation.
So this renewed investigation, combined with the internal review of the police, it all culminated in June 2007.
That's right. On June 14, 2007, 3 men were arrested in connection with the death. And the most significant of these was Michael Barrymore.
Arrested on suspicion of murder.
On suspicion of murder. The media attention, as you can imagine, was immediate and intense.
But then,
The very next day, he was released without charge after questioning. And while the case remained open, that high-stakes arrest failed to deliver any immediate answers.
it showed that even after all that time, while suspicion remained high.
The evidence needed for a realistic prospect of conviction just wasn't there.
So after that dramatic arrest and release in 2007, the criminal investigation, it seems to stall again. But the story then shifts years later back into the civil courts.
It does. In July 2015, Michael Barrymore sues Essex police.
For what exactly?
For damages. For the destruction of his reputation and his career, which he argued was a direct result of his 2007 arrest. The sources show he valued that claim at over £2.4 million.
And this forced the police to defend their actions.
It did, and it led to this very a nuanced legal position. The police actually acknowledged a failure. They confirmed that Barrymore had been wrongfully arrested.
They admitted it.
They did. But, and this is a huge but, they were incredibly careful about the reason. They said the failure was due to administrative errors in the arrest process, a procedural flaw.
Not a lack of evidence.
Exactly. Not a lack of evidence or reasonable suspicion against him at the time.
That's a critical legal distinction.
It is. They're essentially saying we had enough reason to suspect him, but we messed up the paperwork. It allowed them to defend their investigative judgment while admitting a procedural mistake, trying to limit their financial liability.
So the case went to the High Court.
It did. And in August 2017, the High Court initially sided with Barrymore. The court ruled he would be entitled to more than nominal damages.
Can you just break that down? More than nominal.
Of course. So nominal damages are symbolic, a tiny sum, maybe just £1, to show a right was infringed, but no real loss was caused. More than nominal means the court accepts the error was the direct cause of significant financial harm like lost earnings.
So millions, potentially.
Potentially millions. The High Court initially accepted that his career loss was directly traceable to the flawed arrest, opening the door for that huge payout.
But the police appealed that.
They did. And in 2019, the Court of Appeal overturned the ruling. They decided he was only entitled to nominal damages.
Why the change?
The higher court basically said it was much harder to prove the police alone ruined his career. They suggested that damage was likely already done by the circumstances of the death itself, the fact Stuart Lubbock died in his pool with those injuries, regardless of the legality of the 2007 arrest.
So it cut off his path to that big compensation payout.
Precisely. And the story ends with Essex police announcing that Barrymore had dropped his claim entirely. No substantial payments were ever made. It's a powerful example of how complex it is to establish legal and financial responsibility in these kinds of cases.
So nearly 2 decades have passed, and then in 2020, the case is suddenly back in the national conversation.
Right, and this was largely driven by a Channel 4 documentary, Barrymore. The Body in the Pool. It aired in February 2020 and just meticulously went through the whole story again.
Bringing it to a new generation.
And putting it right back in the spotlight. And that renewed focus was followed by a tangible commitment from the police. They knew they had to capitalize on the public interest.
Oh, so what did they do?
In response, Essex police, working with the charity Crime Stoppers, offered a £20,000 reward for information that led to a conviction.
£20,000 for a case that was almost 20 years old.
It's a huge incentive. And it shows that the authorities firmly believed the case could still be solved, that someone out there had the information they needed.
And this appeal for information, it actually worked. It led to a very significant development.
It did. On March 17, 2021, Essex police announced they had arrested a 50-year-old man from Cheshire.
And what was he arrested for?
In connection with the indecent assault and murder of Stuart Lubbock. This was a direct, critical result of that renewed appeal. It suggested that a new piece of the puzzle had finally emerged.
That's the most tangible progress in almost 2 decades. So what happened after the arrest?
Well, as of May 2021, the police confirmed they were preparing to submit a full file on this individual to the Crown Prosecution Service, the CPS.
And the CPS decides whether to actually press charges.
Exactly. They're the gatekeepers. The police investigate, but the CPS decides if there's enough evidence for a realistic prospect of conviction. Preparing that file shows the police believed they had moved beyond mere suspicion.
But even with this arrest, the police made it very clear the investigation wasn't over.
Not at all. They issued these powerful public statements urging witnesses who had been silent for 20 years to finally come forward.
There was that quote from Lucy Morris of Essex Police.
A very direct plea. She said, 9 people were at that party. We know that not everyone was responsible for what happened, but someone was. Now is the time to come forward.
It's an admission that the truth is still being held by someone who was there.
Absolutely. And Detective Chief Inspector Jennings reinforced that, saying Essex police had never given up on this case, but acknowledging how complex it remains, they are still actively hunting for those missing pieces of testimony.
As we come to the end of this deep dive, the focus has to shift to the immense personal cost of this, specifically for Stuart's father, Terry Lubbock.
He dedicated his life to this fight. He used his personal grief as fuel for this public campaign for 2 decades.
And after all that effort, Terry died from terminal cancer on September 15th, 2021. He was 76.
He passed away without getting the clarity or the conviction he fought so hard for.
There's a quote from his friend after his death that is it's so poignant. His friend said that Terry died sad because he's died knowing people never knew the truth about what happened.
Heartbreaking.
He went on to say that no one could have thought harder for their son. It's just a profoundly sad and unjust ending for a father who gave the last years of his life to this singular pursuit.
The authorities, to their credit, they did acknowledge Terry's commitment. Detective Chief Inspector Jennings gave a statement saying that Terry's devotion to his son and to his pursuit of justice knew no bounds.
And he made a promise.
He made a firm promise. He said, "Our investigation into Stuart's death will not end with Terry's. As long as the case remains open, we will do all we can to deliver justice for him and his family."
And that commitment brings us full circle, right back to the core unresolved mystery. We know Stuart Lubbock was found with that fatal mix of drugs and alcohol. We know he suffered horrific anal injuries, trauma that speaks to violence.
And we know the coroner couldn't explain it, delivering that open verdict.
9 people were there in that house. Yet no credible, complete explanation has ever been given.
Given the very specific, very suspicious medical evidence, the history of unreliable witnesses, and the fact the case is still active, the legal truth is still out there, held by a very small number of people.
So for you, the listener, what is the ultimate significance of this long, tortured legal journey? The police have repeatedly pleaded with those who were there to finally do the right thing. When you consider the trauma Stuart suffered, the drugs in his system, and the fact the answer lies with a small group who have been silent for over 2 decades, what does that police plea tell us about where the true leverage for justice remains?
It seems the only thing standing between Stuart's family and the truth is the conscience of a witness.